To millions, he was one of Hollywood's most cherished faces. A 3-time Oscar winner, he's the only actor in history to ever win that many times in the Best Supporting Actor category. Walter Brennan was the grandfatherly figure everyone adored, the lovable sidekick, the cratchy but kind old man with a twinkle in his eye. His on-screen charm made him a legend of the golden age, but behind the folksy smile and the shuffling gait that audiences found so endearing, a much darker truth was hiding in plain sight. For decades, whispers of his extremist beliefs and hateful views have circulated in Hollywood stories of a man so consumed by paranoia and prejudice that he became a pariah to his own peers. This isn't just a story about a beloved actor with controversial opinions. This is the story of how a man used his public persona, a mask of warmth and kindness, to promote an agenda of hate. Now, the real reason why so many of his colleagues grew to despise him, and why the title "the most evil man in Hollywood" has become attached to his name, is finally being exposed. To understand the shock felt by his peers and the public, you first have to understand the man they thought they knew. Walter Andrew Brennan, born in 1894 in Massachusetts, was the quintessential American story of reinvention. He wasn't born into show business. His father was an engineer, and young Walter initially studied the same trade. Though his parents were of Irish descent, his mother was a Massachusetts native. But the stage called to him, and he started performing in vaudeville before his life took a dramatic turn with the outbreak of World War I. Brennan served as a private in France, where his life was permanently altered. During his service, he was the victim of a mustard gas attack, an event that damaged his vocal cords and would later contribute to his uniquely reedy, high-pitched voice. The experience also, according to some accounts, cost him many of his teeth, though other stories claim he lost them in an on-set accident. The war injury seems to be the most cited origin for the physical traits that would, ironically, help make him a star. Throughout his career, he used dentures to suit his roles but often appeared toothless, instantly adding decades to his appearance and allowing him to play characters far older than his actual age. After the war, Brennan tried his hand at a series of ventures, from farming pineapples in Guatemala to making a fortune in the Los Angeles real estate marketer, fortune he subsequently lost in the market crash of the late 1920s. Broke and looking for work, he found his way to Hollywood, but he didn't walk into a starring role. He started at the absolute bottom, as an extra and a stuntman, taking any bit part he could get. He even did stunt work in films like The Bride of Frankenstein. For years, he was just a face in the crowd. But Brennan's unique look and undeniable talent couldn't be ignored. Directors began to notice. A small role in the 1935 film The Wedding Night was expanded, leading to a contract with legendary producer Samuel Goldwyn. It was the break he needed. Just 1 year later, in 1936, he was cast in Come and Get It. His performance as the Swedish logger Swan Bostrom was so compelling that it earned him the very first Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor ever presented. It was a stunning ascent, but it was only the beginning. 2 years later, he won again, for Kentucky. Then in 1940, he won his third Oscar for playing the villainous Judge Roy Bean in The Westerner. 3 Oscars in 5 years was an unprecedented achievement, and he remains the only actor to win 3 times in the Best Supporting Actor category. But his success wasn't without controversy. In the early days of the Academy Awards, members of the Screen Extras Union were allowed to vote. Brennan, having come from their ranks, was immensely popular with this voting bloc. His third win caused such a stir that the Academy changed the rules, revoking voting rights for extras. After that, he was nominated only one more time, for Sergeant York in 1941, but didn't win. Controversy or not, the awards cemented his status. Walter Brennan was no longer just a character actor. He was a Hollywood institution, with 3 gold statues to his name. Walter Brennan became one of the most reliable actors in the industry, while he played a wide variety of parts, including menacing villains like Old Man Clanton in My Darling Clementine. It was his portrayals of cantankerous, cold-hearted old-timers that captured the public's imagination. He became a staple of westerns, working alongside the biggest stars of the day. He was Nadine Groot in Red River, the loyal trailhand to John Wayne's tyrannical Tom Dunstan. Perhaps most famously, he was Deputy Stumpy in another masterpiece, Rio Bravo, again opposite John Wayne and Dean Martin. As the loud-mouthed jailer, he provided the film with much of its comic relief and its heart. The character of Stumpy was the epitome of the Brennan persona, grumpy, fiercely loyal, and utterly endearing. Audiences didn't just watch Walter Brennan, they felt like they knew him. This public image hit its peak in 1957 when he starred in his own television series. The Real McCoys, the sitcom, which ran for 6 successful seasons, was about a family from West Virginia who moves to a farm in Southern California. Brennan played Grandpa Amos McCoy, a character that was the culmination of all the folksy, curmudgeonly roles he had perfected. The show was a massive hit. Grandpa Amos became a national icon, the definitive image of Walter Brennan in the minds of millions. He was the nation's grandpa. The persona was so convincing it bled into other areas of his career. In 1962, at age 67, he recorded a spoken-word track called Old Rivers. It became a surprise hit, climbing to number 5 on the Billboard charts, and making him one of the oldest people at the time to have a top 40 hit. The voice on that record was the voice of Grandpa Amos, the voice of the man America had come to adore. He was seen as a real American character. And it was this carefully cultivated image that made the truth of his real-life beliefs so profoundly shocking. As the 1960s dawned, America was entering a period of profound social and cultural upheaval. The civil rights movement was gaining momentum, anti-war sentiment was growing, and a counterculture was emerging. It was a time of change, and for many in Hollywood, it was a time to embrace progressive ideals. But Walter Brennan was not one of them. While Hollywood was slowly moving forward, Brennan was digging in his heels. The first public signs that Grandpa Amos was not who he appeared to be came through his increasingly vocal political activities. Brennan wasn't just a conservative, his politics were on the far-right fringe. Even for the time in the presidential elections of the 1960s, he endorsed the most extreme figures. In 1964, he backed Barry Goldwater, largely because Goldwater had voted against the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964. By 1968, finding even Richard Nixon too liberal, he threw his support behind the segregationist presidential candidate George Wallace. His political views were rooted in a deep-seated paranoia, particularly about communism. Brennan was convinced the major movements of the era were communist plots orchestrated from overseas to destroy America. He publicly stated his belief that the civil rights movement was being manipulated by foreign agitators to stir up trouble among black Americans, who he claimed were perfectly content. He saw the Watts riots not as an expression of anger over systemic racism, but as a riot that could have, and should have, been stopped with a machine gun. This paranoia wasn't just political, it was personal. He reportedly built a bunker at his home, stocked with an arsenal of weapons, in constant anticipation of a Soviet invasion. His fear was so all-consuming that he began to see communists everywhere, allegedly branding people as such for simply supporting John F. Kennedy. In perhaps the most bizarre manifestation of his paranoia, he became convinced that his friend and frequent co-star, the conservative icon John Wayne, was secretly a communist. The vehicle for many of these extreme views was his membership in the John Birch Society. Founded in 1958, the John Birch Society was a radical right-wing group known for its aggressive anti-communism, opposition to the civil rights movement, and promotion of conspiracy theories. In an era of Cold War tension, it was considered a fringe element, even within the conservative movement. But Walter Brennan was a proud and vocal member for his Hollywood peers, many of whom were liberal and actively supportive of the civil rights cause. Brennan's open affiliation with such a group was horrifying. The whispers were starting to get louder. The cracks in the facade of Grandpa Amos were beginning to show, and what lay beneath was something far darker than anyone had imagined. The man who played kind, humble characters on screen was, in reality, becoming one of Hollywood's most outspoken purveyors of hate. His involvement with the John Birch Society wasn't a quiet affair. He used his fame and the beloved persona of Grandpa Amos to give his extremist views a friendly, trusted voice. A persistent rumor has circulated that Brennan recorded speeches for the John Birch Society in character as Grandpa Amos, using the sitcom character's folksy drawl to preach about the supposed communist threat. While numerous sources repeat this claim, a verifiable primary source for these recordings has never been produced. It may be apocryphal, but the very existence of the rumor speaks to how profoundly people felt he was leveraging the goodwill he had built as America's favorite grandpa to add legitimacy to a hateful ideology. On the sets of his films and TV shows, The mask came off completely. Everett Green. Over the years, this story has taken on a more vivid dimension, with some reports claiming he cackled with delight and danced a spontaneous jig. While these specific details are likely folkloric embellishments, the core of the story is not in dispute. Brennan's son, Andy, reportedly confirmed his father's reaction, stating that while he didn't literally dance, his father was indeed pleased about Dr. King's death because he fervently believed Dr. King was a communist. When Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated just months later, cast and crew reported a similar reaction of jubilation from Brennan. To his peers, this was the point of no return. It was one thing to hold conservative political views. It was another thing entirely to celebrate the murder of a civil rights leader. In an industry that was increasingly embracing social progress, Walter Brennan had declared himself an enemy of it. As his views became more public and his on-set behavior more intolerable, Hollywood began to turn its back on him. Directors and producers grew reluctant to cast the three-time Oscar winner, while he continued to work, appearing in TV shows and Disney films. The frequency and quality of his roles saw a noticeable decline in his final years. The title of this video, "She Utterly Hated Walter Brennan," is symbolic. While there isn't one single, famous actress on record as his sole antagonist, the she represents a collective. It was the Hollywood that was changing the Hollywood of Jane Fonda, of Sidney Poitier, of progressives who were horrified by his open racism. His hatred was met with their contempt. He had become utterly despised by the very industry that had made him a star. When a figure becomes as controversial as Walter Brennan, stories about them tend to grow. It's important to separate the documented facts from the unverified rumors that surround his legacy. This doesn't excuse his behavior. It clarifies it, and in many ways, makes the verifiable truth even more chilling. One of the most sensational stories involves a supposed public feud with actress Debbie Reynolds. The tale usually depicts a confrontation at a studio luncheon where Reynolds challenged Brennan on his political views. It's a great story, but despite its prevalence online, there is no credible documented evidence that this event ever took place. No major biography of either Brennan or Reynolds mentions it, and there are no contemporary news reports. It appears to be a piece of fiction created to dramatize a very real ideological divide. Another powerful claim is that Walter Brennan categorically refused to work with black actors. Given his well-documented racism, this seems entirely plausible. However, the factual record is more complex. For instance, in the 1956 film Goodbye, My Lady, Brennan co-starred in a production that featured Sidney Poitier in a supporting role. It's more accurate to say that his rampant racism and opposition to the civil rights movement created a hostile atmosphere and contributed to systemic exclusion, and that he personally was a source of bigoted vitriol on set. The hatred was real, but manifesting as an absolute, contractual refusal is not strongly supported by his filmography. Then there is the anecdote involving Everett Greenbaum, the writer from The Real McCoy. In one version of his account, Greenbaum tells a story about how his producers pranked him. Knowing his disdain for Brennan's bigotry, they told him a script had to be rewritten because Brennan was refusing to appear with a Japanese actor. Greenbaum, enraged, supposedly ran to confront Brennan before being stopped and told it was a joke. The story serves as a powerful illustration of Brennan's reputation on set, even if the inciting incident was invented for the prank. These distinctions are important. The reality of Walter Brennan's bigotry doesn't need exaggeration. He did publicly support segregationist politicians. He was a vocal member of the John Birch Society. He did, by multiple accounts, express satisfaction at the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. These are the horrifying, verifiable truths. The unsubstantiated stories, while dramatic, can sometimes obscure the cold, hard facts of his real-life ideology. The truth is bad enough. It's a complicated and disturbing story. It also brings up a difficult question we still wrestle with today, so let us know in the comments. Does separating the provable facts from the exaggerated rumors change your view on Walter Brennan's legacy? And how much should an artist's personal beliefs affect how we view their work? Walter Brennan died of emphysema in 1974 at the age of 80. He left behind a staggering body of work, with over 230 film and television appearances in a career that spanned 5 decades. He also left behind a legacy so deeply fractured and contradictory that it continues to be debated. How do we remember Walter Brennan? As the 3-time Academy Award winner, a gifted character actor who could steal a scene with a single gravelly line. Do we remember him as the star of Rio Bravo and The Real McCoys, a man whose performances brought joy to millions? For a generation, he was the gold standard of character acting. Or do we remember him as the man who used ethnic slurs on set, who branded his colleagues as communists, and who celebrated the death of a hero? Do we remember him as the proud member of an extremist group, a man so consumed by paranoia that he built a bomb shelter? This is the central conflict of his story. His professional legacy is, in many ways, undeniable. His talent was immense, and his contributions to some of Hollywood's greatest films are significant. But his personal legacy is one of intolerance and hate, and it casts a long dark shadow over his achievements. In recent years, as society reevaluates its history, Brennan's reputation has been revisited. The once lovable Grandpa Amos is now often discussed in the context of his bigotry. The YouTube search results for his name are filled with titles like the most evil man in Hollywood. This is his legacy now. It is not just the Oscars and the classic films. It is the hatred and the paranoia which have come to define him for a new generation. The story of Walter Brennan is a powerful case study in the age-old debate about separating art from the artist. Is it possible to watch Rio Bravo and enjoy the performance of Stumpy without thinking of the man who played him? For many, the answer is no. His personal views were so repugnant that they irrevocably taint his art. The warmth of his on-screen persona now feels like a chilling deception. In the end, the story of Walter Brennan is a tragedy of a man blessed with immense talent who chose to use his platform not to uplift, but to divide. He crafted a public image of a quintessential American folk hero, all while harboring an ideology that stood against the very progress the nation was struggling to achieve. The whispers that followed him for decades weren't just rumors. They were echoes of a truth that many in Hollywood knew firsthand. The lovable old man with the twinkling eyes was, to them, a bigot. The national grandfather was a purveyor of hate. The she who utterly hated Walter Brennan was not one woman. It was the conscience of an industry and a country that was trying to evolve. It was everyone who believed in the promise of civil rights, in equality, and in a future that Walter Brennan so vehemently and so hatefully rejected. His story is a stark reminder that the brightest lights in Hollywood can sometimes cast the darkest of shadows. If you found this look into the hidden side of Hollywood history compelling, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next video. And check out our other deep dives into the scandals and secrets of the Golden Age right here. Thanks for watching.